A city carved entirely into rock, hidden behind a canyon barely wide enough to walk through. An abbey rising from the sea, cut off from land twice a day by the tide. A staircase in Austria that ends in glass, hanging over 400 meters of nothing. For thousands of years, humans have built in places that told them not to, and 22 of those places are what we're crossing tonight, one by one, starting with a tower that was never supposed to lean at all. 850 years ago, builders in Pisa started a bell tower on ground barely 3 meters deep. The soil beneath was sand and soft clay. By the third floor, it was already leaning. They kept building anyway. Each new level tried to correct the last one, and the tower grew into a shape no architect ever intended, a curve frozen in stone. At its worst, the top sat over 5 meters off-center. In 1990, engineers closed it to the public. The lean had become a genuine risk of collapse. What followed was one of the strangest rescue operations in engineering history. Hundreds of tons of counterweight, soil extraction on the high side, a fight to stabilize, not straighten, 8.5 centuries of drift. Today, the Leaning Tower stands exactly as its failure made it. A mistake nobody could fix became the one thing nobody wanted to lose. Engineers didn't just stop the lean. They now track it down to fractions of a millimeter, with sensors buried in the foundation feeding data to monitors around the clock. Galileo is said to have used the tower for his own experiments on falling objects, a story historians still debate, but one that's followed the tower for centuries regardless. At its current angle, the top overhangs the base by roughly 4 meters, a lean that would have doomed almost any other building this tall. Pisa didn't just survive its own mistake. It turned into the most famous accidental landmark on Earth. Millions of visitors climb the tower's spiral staircase every year, all 296 steps curving through a structure that keeps leaning the entire way up. The climb itself has become part of the appeal, proof, step by step, of exactly how far off-center the building really is. In the Aegean Sea, off the island of Andros, there's a rock with nothing on it but a lighthouse. No beach, no dock, no land bridge, just white stone rising out of open water, built to fit exactly the footprint of the rock beneath it. The original structure went up in the early 1900s. It didn't survive the Second World War. In 1994, Greece rebuilt Tourlitis on the same isolated rock, facing the same waves that destroyed it the first time. Every storm still hits the foundation directly. Every maintenance visit depends entirely on the sea being calm enough to allow one. It's a lighthouse with almost no land to stand on, guarding a coastline it's barely attached to. Keeping the light working here has never been simple. Technicians can only reach the rock when the sea cooperates, sometimes waiting days for a calm enough crossing to carry out basic repairs. The automated light now runs largely unattended, guiding ships past a stretch of coastline that claimed vessels for centuries before the lighthouse ever existed. Storms here don't just batter the structure from one direction. Waves wrap around the entire rock, hitting the lighthouse from multiple sides within the same hour. It's a level of exposure most coastal structures are specifically built to avoid, not embrace. Local sailors once relied on hand signals and bonfires lit along the coast before any lighthouse existed here, a reminder of how dangerous this stretch of sea was for generations. Even now, charts still mark the surrounding waters as requiring extra caution in poor weather. Twice a day, the sea decides whether Mont-Saint-Michel is an island or part of the mainland. Monks began building on this granite outcrop in the bay over 1,000 years ago, choosing a rock that flooding tides cut off from the coast on a rhythm nobody could control. Each new addition to the abbey had to work with a foundation of solid rock rising straight out of tidal sand, some of the most treacherous quicksand on the French coast. For centuries, the only way across at low tide was on foot, racing a tide that returns faster than a person can run. A causeway eventually connected it permanently to land. but engineers deliberately redesigned it in the 21st century to let the tide flow back underneath, restoring the island to what it was always supposed to be, something the sea reclaims on schedule, whether anyone is ready or not. At its most extreme, the tidal difference here can exceed 14 meters between low and high water, among the largest tidal ranges in continental Europe. Pilgrims crossing the sandflats historically risked being caught by tides moving faster than a person can run, and quicksand pockets that could trap a traveler within minutes. Today's causeway was specifically redesigned as a raised bridge, letting water flow freely beneath it instead of blocking the tide the way the old solid road once did. The abbey above has survived sieges, fires, and centuries of restoration. But the one force it was never able to fully control was the ocean at its base. Fewer than 50 people live within the walls year-round today, compared to thousands of visitors passing through on a single summer day. Most of the historic buildings that once housed a working village now serve tourism instead, leaving the abbey itself as the only part still functioning close to its original purpose. The Tara River Canyon cuts nearly 1,000 meters deep through Montenegro, one of the deepest canyons in Europe. Spanning it is a single concrete arch bridge completed in 1940 that was for a time the largest concrete arch in Europe. The main span alone stretches over 100 meters with nothing supporting it from below. No pillar reaching down into the gorge, just the arch itself carrying the entire load. Cars and pedestrians share the same narrow deck, with almost no room to stop and take in exactly how far down the river really is. Every vehicle that crosses transfers its full weight through that one arch, across a void that swallowed the sound of the river below for over 80 years. During the Second World War, part of the bridge was deliberately destroyed by resistance fighters to slow an advancing army, then rebuilt after using much of the same original design. The canyon it crosses is one of the deepest in Europe, rivaled on the continent by only a handful of gorges. Rafting expeditions now run along the river far below, giving visitors a rare view of the bridge from underneath, a perspective that makes the single unsupported arch look even less plausible than it does from above. The canyon below has been compared in scale to the Grand Canyon, though far less visited, keeping much of its raw character intact. Rafting trips along the Tara River are considered among the best in the Balkans, partly because the surrounding wilderness has barely been developed. Enormous columns of rock rise straight out of the ground in central Greece, their tops just wide enough for a handful of buildings. On several of them sit monasteries, some more than 300 meters above the base of the cliffs, with almost no flat ground to spare. That's why balconies, terraces, and corridors were built hanging directly off the rock edge instead of set back from it. To reach them, visitors climb stairways carved straight into the mountainside, some connected by narrow bridges running from the cliff face to the monastery doors. For centuries, food and supplies went up by rope and basket, hauled hand over hand because no road could ever reach these summits. 600 years later, monasteries still cling to rock towers that remain almost entirely separated from the world below. At the peak of their use, as many as 24 monasteries occupied these rock towers. Today, only a handful remain active. Monks historically controlled who could visit by controlling the only way up, nets and baskets that could simply be left down if unwanted visitors approached. The rock pillars themselves formed over millions of years of erosion, wind, and water, slowly carving away everything except these isolated columns. Modern staircases have made the climb far safer than it once was, but several monasteries still limit access, preserving the same isolation that drew monks here in the first place. UNESCO added the site to its World Heritage List in 1988, recognizing both its geological rarity and its unbroken religious history. Few places on Earth combine natural rock formations this dramatic with continuous human habitation stretching back this many centuries. Walk the Canopy path at Kakum National Park and you won't see a single concrete pillar holding it up. The whole thing hangs from ancient trees instead, using their trunks as living anchor points for the load-bearing cables. Between each anchor, a suspended wooden walkway stretches through the forest canopy, 350 meters long in total, held up by just 7 towers roughly 40 meters above the ground. Each platform is barely 30 centimeters wide, not enough for 2 people to pass each other. Every step sends a vibration down the entire line. More than 20 years after it opened, it remains one of the oldest canopy walkways still operating in Africa, a path built almost entirely out of trust in the trees holding it up. The walkway was originally built in the 1990s with help from engineers experienced in canopy access for scientific research, not tourism. Researchers still use similar structures to study rainforest ecosystems from above, since so much of a rainforest's life happens in the canopy rather than on the ground. Standing on the walkway at dawn, when mist still clings to the treetops, visitors can sometimes spot monkeys and birds moving through the canopy at eye level, a vantage point almost impossible to get any other way in dense rainforest. The park protects one of the last significant stretches of tropical rainforest in Ghana, home to species found almost nowhere else in the country, including several types of forest elephant and rare primates rarely seen from ground level. Some structures don't just hold back water, they shift the planet. The Three Gorges Dam spans more than 2 kilometers across the Yangtze, the 3rd longest river on Earth. Behind it sits a reservoir holding tens of billions of cubic meters of water, enough that NASA calculated it can measurably slow the Earth's rotation by a fraction of a microsecond a day, a vérifié chiffre exact, and shift the planet's axis by a couple of centimeters. It's also the largest power station on the planet by generating capacity built specifically to convert that same immense pressure into electricity for over 100 million people downstream. One structure holding back a river and nudging a planet at the same time. Building it meant relocating more than 1 million people from towns and villages that would be submerged once the reservoir filled, one of the largest resettlement projects in modern history. The dam also acts as a flood control barrier for tens of millions of people living downstream along the Yangtze, a role considered as important as its electricity output. Ships pass through a system of locks that raise and lower vessels dozens of meters to get around the dam wall, a process that alone can take hours for a single crossing. At full capacity, the dam alone generates roughly as much electricity as 20 coal-fired power plants running continuously. That output makes it, by generating capacity, the largest power station ever built by humans, anywhere on Earth. This walkway was never built for tourists. Workers needed a way between 2 hydroelectric plants on opposite sides of the El Chorro Gorge in southern Spain. So in the early 20th century, engineers bolted a narrow concrete path directly into the cliff. At its most famous stretch, the walkway runs about 100 meters above the Guadalhorce River, in places barely a meter wide, rock rising on one side and a straight drop into the canyon on the other. Decades of exposure eventually broke the concrete apart, sections collapsed, and the original path was closed as too dangerous to cross. A new walkway was later built directly above it, but the shattered remnants of the old one are still visible in the gorge below, a permanent reminder of exactly how narrow the margin used to be. Before its renovation, the original walkway had gained a reputation as one of the most dangerous trails on Earth, blamed for several fatal falls that eventually forced its closure entirely. When it reopened, authorities added safety nets below sections of the path and required visitors to wear helmets, transforming an abandoned industrial catwalk into a controlled tourist route. Even with modern safety measures, the exposure hasn't changed. The drop below is the same one that made the original path so notorious in the first place. More than 300,000 visitors now cross the renovated path each year, a volume the original 20th century walkway was never built to handle. Timed entry tickets are now required just to manage the flow of people along such a narrow route. 14 wooden steps lead down from the summit at Dachstein, not toward safety, but toward the edge. At the bottom sits a small glass platform that extends completely past the mountain's edge, suspended in open air roughly 400 meters above the valley floor. Stand on it and you're looking straight down through the glass at the rock face falling away beneath your feet. The whole structure sits at nearly 2,700 meters, fully exposed to alpine weather. A light coat of frost is enough to make every step feel far more serious than it looks. There are no support columns rising from below. The entire load transfers sideways into the cliff through a system of anchors and steel framework. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people climb those 14 steps toward one of the most exposed viewpoints in the Alps. The glass used in the platform is engineered to hold significant weight while remaining completely transparent, tested specifically for the extreme temperature swings this altitude produces. On clear days, visibility from the platform stretches for dozens of kilometers across the surrounding peaks, while on foggy days the glass can seem to disappear entirely into white cloud. Maintenance crews inspect the structure regularly for ice buildup, since even a thin layer can change how the glass handles weight and grip underfoot. The platform sits within a larger network of via ferrata routes and cable cars, making it one stop within a much bigger high-altitude complex rather than an isolated attraction. Visitors often combine the platform with a full day of glacier hiking on the same mountain. Rising nearly 200 meters straight out of the Sri Lankan jungle, Sigiriya is a single block of rock that an ancient king turned into a palace. Frescoes, gardens, a moat system, and the remains of a monumental gateway shaped like a lion once guided visitors up the exposed rock face to the summit. Getting there today still means climbing narrow stairways bolted into sheer stone, with the jungle canopy falling away below on every side. Built roughly 1,500 years ago, a vérifié date exact, the fortress combined near-total defensibility with genuine luxury. A royal residence perched somewhere that logic says nothing should be built, let alone something meant to be lived in. Archaeologists believe the site combined a royal residence with religious significance, evidenced by Buddhist monastic ruins found nearby that predate the palace itself. The famous frescoes that survive on the rock face depict dozens of women painted with pigments that have held their color for over a millennium despite constant exposure to wind and weather. Climbing to the summit today still means passing through the remains of the lion-shaped gateway that gave the site its name, even though only the paws of the original statue remain standing. Historians still debate whether the site functioned primarily as a royal palace, a monastery, or both simultaneously across different periods of its history. The debate itself has kept archaeologists returning to Sigiriya for new excavations well into the 21st century. Predjama Castle wasn't built on a hill. It was built inside the mouth of a cave wedged directly into a cliff over 100 meters high. From the front, there's a single sheer rock face and one exposed wall of the castle. The other three sides simply don't exist as separate walls. The mountain itself closes them in. Behind the last rooms, a passage leads into a natural cave system stretching more than 14 kilometers through the rock. For centuries, that tunnel let defenders bring in food during a siege, resupplying a castle that looked from outside completely cut off. It's what turned Predjama into a fortress that was nearly impossible to conquer by force. A castle whose real defense was never the walls, but the mountain wrapped around them. A local legend claims a robber baron once used the hidden cave passage to hold out against a months-long siege, sneaking out through the tunnels to bring back fresh supplies while his besiegers believed he was starving. Whether or not the story is entirely true, the cave system behind the castle is real and extensively mapped, drawing cavers as much as castle visitors. Later owners added rooms and defensive features over centuries, but the core strategy never changed. Let the mountain do most of the defending. The castle has stood in some form for over 800 years, making it one of the best preserved cave castles anywhere in the world. Its combination of masonry and raw rock face remains almost entirely intact compared to most medieval fortresses of the same age. To reach Petra, visitors first have to walk through the Siku, a natural canyon barely wide enough for 2 horses to pass, its walls rising over 100 meters on either side. Then the passage opens and a facade carved directly into rose-red sandstone appears. The treasury, more than 40 meters tall, cut straight into solid rock rather than built up from the ground. The Nabateans who created it over 2,000 years ago didn't lay a single stone for the frontage. They carved down and inward, sculpting an entire structure out of a cliff that was never going anywhere. Behind that famous facade lies an entire city of tombs, temples, and dwellings, all carved the same way, hidden behind a natural rock corridor that kept Petra concealed from outsiders for centuries. Beyond the treasury, the site spans several square kilometers, including a Roman-style theater carved into the rock and tombs stretching along canyon walls for over a kilometer. The Nabateans who built Petra also engineered a sophisticated water system, channeling and storing rainfall through the arid landscape centuries before modern plumbing existed elsewhere in the region. For centuries after the Nabatean kingdom declined, Petra was essentially unknown outside local Bedouin communities, only reintroduced to the wider world by a European explorer in the early 19th century. In 2007, Petra was voted one of the new 7 wonders of the world, cementing its place as one of the most recognized ancient sites on Earth. Despite that fame, archaeologists estimate that a significant portion of the ancient city still remains unexcavated beneath the sand. Ait Benhaddou rises out of the Moroccan desert as a cluster of earthen towers stacked against a hillside, built almost entirely from mud, brick, straw, and packed clay. There's no steel frame holding it up, no concrete foundation, just centuries of builders repairing and rebuilding walls that erode a little more with every rainy season. It sits on what was once a critical stop on the caravan route between the Sahara and Marrakech, chosen specifically because the hillside offered defense and a clear view of anyone approaching. Entire families used to live within its fortified walls, sharing communal spaces and granaries built to withstand both raids and the desert climate. Today, much of the Kasbah stands empty, kept alive mostly through restoration, a fortress built from the ground it stands on, in a material that was never meant to last 1,000 years, and somehow still has. The Kasbah has appeared in numerous film and television productions, drawn to its dramatic silhouette and ancient construction style that doesn't require modern sets. Local families still maintain and restore the walls using traditional building techniques passed down for generations, mixing mud, straw, and water in ratios calibrated to the desert climate. Only a handful of families still live inside the historic walls today, with most residents having moved to a newer village built just across the river. UNESCO listed the Kasbah as a World Heritage Site in 1987, citing its exceptional example of traditional earthen architecture increasingly rare across North Africa. Restoration work is ongoing and constant, since the same rain that occasionally threatens the walls is also what the region depends on. 233 meters above the streets of Macau, a walkway barely wide enough for one wraps around the outside of the observation deck of Macau Tower. On one side, the tower itself. On the other, nothing but open air and the city far below. There's no glass barrier here, no guardrail closing the space in. You can walk to the very edge, lean out, and take in a view that most high-rise structures, even modern ones, keep firmly behind glass. It's a rare design choice, turning the outer edge of a tower into somewhere people are actually meant to stand, not just look at from inside. Participants are secured to an overhead rail system throughout the walk, a safety measure that still allows freedom of movement along the narrow path. The tower itself was designed with entertainment in mind from the start. also hosting one of the highest bungee jumps in the world from roughly the same height as the skywalk. On clear days, the view extends across the Pearl River Delta, taking in both Macau's dense skyline and the water separating it from mainland China. The tower stands roughly 338 meters tall overall, with the skywalk positioned near the very top of the observation deck structure. It remains one of the tallest structures in Macau, visible from much of the surrounding peninsula. At nearly 500 meters long, the Charles Quonen Suspension Bridge is one of the longest pedestrian suspension bridges on Earth. À vérifier longueur exacte et classement actuel. It hangs across a valley in the Swiss Alps, connecting two hiking trails that used to require a much longer detour around the mountainside. The deck is barely wide enough for single-file walking, and it moves. Every gust of wind, every footstep from other hikers transfers straight through the cables. There's no way to cross without feeling the bridge respond to you. Below, the valley floor sits far enough down that the drop is measured less in meters than in how long it takes to stop looking. The bridge replaced a much longer and more difficult route that used to require hikers to descend into the valley and climb back up the other side, adding hours to what is now a direct crossing. Engineers designed the structure to sway intentionally within safe limits, since a completely rigid bridge this long would be far more vulnerable to extreme wind loads than one built to flex. Local guides report that most hikers who cross it do so in complete silence, focused entirely on the steel cables underfoot. The bridge opened in 2017 and quickly became one of the region's most photographed hiking landmarks, drawing crowds specifically to walk across it rather than simply pass through the area. Local tourism boards credit it with reviving interest in trails that had seen far fewer hikers before. One of Norway's tallest waterfalls drops through a gorge near Eidfjord, and rather than fence it off, engineers built modern viewing platforms and a bridge that bring visitors right up to the edge of the drop. The bridge spans the gorge close enough to the falls that the mist reaches the deck. Standing on the platform, the water isn't something you view from a distance. It's directly beneath and around you, loud enough to make conversation difficult. The structure was built specifically to hold that experience, getting people as close as physically possible to a waterfall that, for most of its existence, no one could safely approach at all. The waterfall itself drops in stages rather than a single sheer fall, adding to the roar and mist that reach the viewing platforms even on days without rain. Engineers designed the bridge and platform specifically to blend into the landscape, using materials and angles meant to draw attention to the falls rather than to the structure itself. In winter, sections of the falls partially freeze, creating massive ice formations that draw a completely different set of visitors than the summer crowds. The falls drop a total of roughly 180 meters, making them one of the most visited natural landmarks in Norway. The surrounding fjord region draws visitors year-round, though the falls themselves are at their most dramatic during spring snowmelt. In the Congos de Mont-Rebé, a narrow limestone canyon on the border of two Spanish regions, a walkway barely a meter wide has been bolted directly into the cliff wall. Below, the river carves through rock that in places closes to just a few meters across, the walls rising almost vertically on both sides. The path exists purely because the canyon floor offers no other way through, no room for a road, no space for a wider trail. Walkers move single file along steel and concrete anchored straight into stone, with a straight drop to the water on one side and unbroken rock on the other, following a route where the canyon itself decided exactly how wide the path could ever be. The canyon marks a natural boundary between two Spanish regions, and the walkway has become a popular route for hikers connecting trails on both sides of the gorge. Local guides note that water levels in the river below can shift quickly after rain upstream, changing the sound and spray reaching the walkway within the same afternoon. Climbers also use the canyon walls above the path for technical routes, adding another layer of activity to a passage never originally built with recreation in mind. At its narrowest point, the canyon walls close to barely 20 meters apart, towering hundreds of meters overhead on both sides. The contrast between the tight passage and the sheer height above is part of what draws hikers back to this specific stretch repeatedly. At over 10,000 square kilometers, the Salar de Uyuni is the largest salt flat on Earth. A crust of salt so flat and so vast that during the rainy season, a thin layer of water turns the entire surface into a mirror stretching to the horizon in every direction. Building anything permanent here means working against a ground that shifts, that corrodes metal, and that offers no normal foundation material for kilometers around. So builders used what the desert actually provided: blocks cut directly from the salt crust itself, stacked into walls, furniture, even entire hotels, built almost entirely out of the ground beneath them. Every structure here has to be maintained constantly, because the same salt that makes construction possible is also slowly working to dissolve it, a building material sourced from the exact environment trying hardest to destroy it. Beneath the salt crust lies one of the world's largest known reserves of lithium, a resource increasingly critical for batteries and a source of growing international interest in the region. During the dry season, the flat cracks into a honeycomb pattern of polygonal shapes stretching to the horizon, a striking contrast to the mirror effect of the wet season. Local communities have harvested salt from the flat for generations, long before the mirror effect made it a global tourist destination. The salt flat formed from the drying of prehistoric lakes thousands of years ago, leaving behind a crust several meters thick in places. Scientists also use the flat's extreme flatness to calibrate satellites, since almost nowhere else on Earth offers a surface this level across such a distance. High above the Adriatic coast, the Biokovo skywalk extends out from a mountain ridge in a horseshoe of glass and steel, positioned specifically to put visitors directly above the drop toward the sea. Below, the coastline near Makarska stretches out with almost nothing blocking the view. No railing height, no solid barrier softening how far down it actually is. The platform sits at over 1,000 meters, engineered to handle constant wind exposure on an open ridge with no shelter on either side. It's a structure built entirely around one idea: give people the sensation of standing in open air above a coastline most would only ever see from a plane. Engineers anchored the structure to withstand the powerful winds common along this exposed ridge, which can shift dramatically depending on conditions rolling in off the Adriatic. The platform was completed relatively recently, designed specifically to draw visitors up into Biokovo Nature Park rather than leaving the mountain range as a backdrop seen only from the coast below. On especially clear days, visitors report being able to see across the sea toward Italy, though exact visibility depends heavily on weather. Biokovo Nature Park stretches along Croatia's Dalmatian coast, with the skywalk positioned near its highest accessible point. The park protects a range of altitudes rarely found so close to the Adriatic coastline, from coastal scrub to near alpine terrain within a short drive. On the right morning, the Milau Viaduct doesn't cross a valley. It crosses a sea of clouds. Its tallest pylon rises higher than the Eiffel Tower, making it the tallest bridge structure on the planet by pylon height. A Verifier classement actuel, spanning the Tarn Valley in southern France on cables thin enough to look almost impossible against the scale of the deck they hold. Designed by architect Norman Foster and engineer Michel Virlogeux, the bridge was built to solve a specific problem: a valley too wide and too deep for a conventional crossing, without forcing traffic down into the town below. The result is a structure so tall it sometimes disappears above the weather entirely, cars crossing through open sky while the valley floor sits hidden in fog hundreds of meters beneath them. During construction, engineers used a technique that pushed the deck sections out horizontally from both sides of the valley simultaneously, meeting in the middle with almost no room for error over such a long span. The bridge cut a notoriously congested route through the town of Milau down to a fraction of its former travel time, rerouting traffic that used to crawl through narrow streets below. Weather monitoring along the bridge is constant, since high winds at that elevation can require temporarily reducing speed limits or closing lanes. The bridge opened in 2004, immediately reducing what had been one of the worst traffic bottlenecks in southern France. Engineers Michel Virloju and architect Norman Foster later received international recognition for a design that prioritized minimal visual impact on the valley below. Bran Castle sits on a rocky outcrop controlling one of the few mountain passes between Transylvania and Wallachia, built specifically because whoever held this narrow gap controlled trade and troop movement for the entire region. The castle's foundations follow the natural contours of the rock itself, towers rising unevenly wherever the stone allowed, rather than along a uniform plan. For centuries, it served as a customs post and defensive stronghold, its position on the cliff making a direct assault nearly impossible without exposing an army on the approach below. Long after its strategic purpose faded, the castle's silhouette against the Carpathian Mountains became linked to the Dracula legend, a myth built entirely on top of a real fortress that was never constructed for anything but controlling stone, forest, and a mountain pass that still narrows to almost nothing at its tightest point. Despite the legend, historians widely agree the castle's connection to the Dracula story is largely a modern tourism narrative rather than a documented historical link. The building itself has served multiple roles over the centuries: customs post, royal residence, and now museum, each leaving physical traces still visible in its layout today. Visitors climbing through its narrow stone stairways can see how the interior was shaped entirely around defending the mountain pass below, long before anyone associated the castle with vampires. The castle now operates as a museum, displaying furniture and artifacts collected by Romanian royalty who once used it as a residence. Restoration efforts have focused on preserving the original stonework rather than modernizing the interior, keeping much of its medieval character intact. Crossing Tokyo Bay by road means doing something most bridges never ask of you: driving underwater. The Aqua-Line starts as a bridge, then plunges into a tunnel running beneath the seabed, connecting the two shores of the bay through an artificial island partway across. Engineers had to solve for both a major suspension structure and a long undersea tunnel in the same crossing, built to handle earthquake risk, shipping lanes above, and enormous water pressure below at the same time. It cuts what used to be a long detour around the bay down to a fraction of the distance. One crossing, two completely different engineering problems stitched together at a single artificial island in the middle of the water. 22 structures, 22 places where the ground said no and someone built anyway. From a tower that leaned by accident to a castle carved straight into legend, the pattern never changes. Wherever the terrain refuses to cooperate, someone eventually decides that's exactly where they'll build. Which one of these would you actually walk across? Tell me in the comments. And if a 2-kilometer dam that shifts the Earth's rotation isn't the last impossible place we cover, subscribe, because next time we're going underground into the structures nobody was ever supposed to find.